Chapter 16 In Sadness and Defeat. From being someone who followed the English ma'am everywhere she went, I now became the one who tried to avoid her at every step. From someone who waited the whole day to get a glance of her, I actually started hiding from her. Whenever I saw her walking down the corridor towards me, I would turn around and hide somewhere. Once or twice, she even called out to me, but I didn't listen. How could I? I felt cheated by her. I also felt a deep sadness within me. My friends asked me the reason for my gloominess, but I didn't say anything. I just shook my head. I began to avoid my friends and sat alone even during the break. Then, one day, while I was sitting on a bench outside the field, Nikita walked up to me. "Hi," she said with a smile. I didn't respond, but my sad eyes probably told her the story. "Listen, I know you like English, ma'am," she said hesitatingly. I was shocked. How had she come to know? Could she just figure out? Was I that transparent? But I chose not to admit it. What are you saying?" I asked with as much surprise as I could manage. Girls are probably more mature than boys. At least Nikita was. "It's okay. My mother says it's normal for us to have infatuations at this age. This is a sign of our growing up." She was going on, but I was not listening. All I was thinking was if Nikita was able to find this out, soon my friends would find out too. Or, seeing me here with Nikita, they would think I was getting attracted to her. There would be no end to their teasing me. Nikita was still talking. "Nikita, I have to go. I have a class," I blurted out and ran away from her. From then, I tried to act as normal as possible. Studies came to my rescue and I began to think only about my subjects and how I would do well in them. I began working hard for my board exams. Soon, I began to feel normal again. The day I heard English ma'am had got married and quit the school, I didn't feel quite as much pain. I thought my board exams for class 10 had gone off quite well. I kept saying so to my parents, who were always worried. There was still some time before the results would be announced. Everybody was tense about it. So far, in my entire school life, I had been in the top 10% of my class. It didn't matter how fun-loving I was. I had managed to stay near the top ranks. But in all these years of school, I was yet to achieve my ultimate goal of topping the exams. There were about 100 students in the same class at Guru Nanak Public School, divided into several sections. Being the topper at this school was not an easy thing. With all my hard work, I had managed to secure the second rank in the half-yearly exams of class 9, which had again dropped to the third by class 10. But I had a lot of expectations from the board exams that I had written. When the results came out in June-July, I was in for a shock. I had scored 69% in all. This was the first time I had ever dropped below 70%. The topper from our town had scored 75%. I was 6% behind him. In the 90s, anything above 70% was a great score and a reason to celebrate. Mothers whose kids had done well had all the reason to call up and flaunt their kids' marks in front of those whose kids had scored less. My son scored 72%. How much did yours score? As if you didn't know, I felt ashamed, embarrassed, guilty, and humiliated, all at the same time. It had been my worst performance ever, and the board exams are discussed beyond the boundaries of school, across towns and cities. It's a benchmark, I guess, for the entire nation. I had hopelessly slipped up on this benchmark. When you expect fewer marks, you are able to handle this situation better. But when you expect to excel and something of this sort happens, you first have to learn how to come to terms with the dashing of your own hopes, and then cope with everyone else's opinion about it. It was now that phase of my life. At first, I went into denial. I sent in my papers for rechecking, but there was no luck. In Hindi, I had still scored 41 out of 100. My proficiency in the national language had pulled my entire percentage down. Some of my close friends tried to console me by saying that I should be happy because I had scored 98 out of 100 in maths. But they knew, as well as I did, that maths could not change my aggregate. As the reality of the low marks sunk in, I slowly went into a state of depression. The mothers of the batchmates who had scored better than me kept running into my mother and haunting my life. I wanted to run away to some place else, where no one asked me about my exams or expected anything else of me. I was not good enough for those expectations, and those expectations were not good for me. Instead of treating my friends as friends, those expectations had made me start viewing them as my competitors. This should not have been the case. Besides, despite all my hard work, I had scored way less than expected. What else could I have done? I decided to give up. One day, I broke down in front of my mother and told her that she or my father should not expect anything great out of me, because I was not as good as everyone else. I was smart enough but not the best, and I felt suffocated in this madness to become number one. Mom wiped away my tears. She made me lie down with my head on her lap and stroked my forehead affectionately. She told me why she wanted me to succeed. She told me how my father worked hard to afford all the expenses of my education. She told me that my father had not been able to complete his own education because my grandfather had not been able to afford it. Perhaps that's why Dad made it a point that I took my education seriously. Mom told me about the sacrifices that both of them had been making, only to afford a good education for my brother and me. She never asked Dad for new clothes for herself, only for us. She never did any shopping for herself, only for us. As a family, we never went out to a restaurant for a meal. We always ate at home. Before she told me, I never knew that most of the money that my father earned was being spent on our education, but it was in our hands to do the rest. She told me that getting good marks for me should not be a matter of winning the rat race or showing off to everyone else. But a good education was our only way of bringing the family out of poverty. Our parents were not even concerned about themselves, only about my brother's life and mine. The only way for us to have a good life when we grew up was to score the finest of results. Whatever mom said that evening kept ringing in my head for a long time. She had her reasons, and indeed she was right in holding them. As the days passed, I even started liking the song Papa Kehti Hai. It had started making a different sense to me. Soon I wanted to become the one who could sing that song and prove to the world that I meant every word of what I was singing. This time there was a positive change within me. I no longer envied those who were ahead of me in the rat race. I felt calm, composed, and focused solely on my own goals. And then, just like that, I returned to the rat race. But this time, I no longer felt like a rat.